In this video, I'm going to show you how to clean the carburetor on this Toro zero-turn lawnmower. It has the 22.5 horsepower V-twin engine. This is Rudy from Take a Bath Productions with another video showing you how to fix various things. If you're a subscribed member to my community, then welcome back. If you're new to my channel, consider clicking that subscribe button below and like this video if it was helpful for you. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So before we get started, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. I took the back shroud off of the mower right here, only for filming purposes. You don't need to do that to get the carburetor off. It will come off without that. But you do need to take this cover off, and you need to do that by loosening 5 of these screws. There's 6 screws. All you have to do is loosen them, and they'll slip out. The one that's on the oil dipstick over there, you do have to take completely out. So let's get started. So this uses a 10mm wrench. Just loosen it just enough so that it can slip through here is all you got to do. Alright, I'm going to do the same thing to 5 other bolts. Okay, I got all the bolts loosened, but you might notice if yours has not been tampered with too much, you may have a wire tie right here holding this wire. I've already got a new wire tie in there. Just cut that wire tie and you're going to need a new one to put that back. Okay, so you will need to pull this oil drain hose out of the holder right here. Now over time, that thing can kind of freeze itself on there, and if it does that, don't just force it off because you'll break that little thing that comes off of there. Kind of take some pliers and maybe you can grab it from the end, kind of like this. See that? It's kind of slipping down. This way you don't break it. Right, just like that. One last thing, just pull the air filter out. And that's a good time to change it if it's dirty. And just pull the whole thing straight off of there and expose the motor. Next thing you're going to want to do is undo the linkages. This side is the choke side. I usually put this in the choked position. It gives you a little more clearance right here. And just push that out of the way just like that. And pull that off of there carefully. Just like so. And then just set the linkage rod out of the way so you don't get it mixed up with anything else. And you can just leave it hooked to the mower. Alright, and the throttle side is almost the same way, except you have this little spring here. Just take a pair of needle nose pliers if you got them. And get that little spring out of there. And then same thing with this. Just kind of push that like that, see that? And just spin it around. And there you go. Same thing, just leave the linkage hooked up to the mower. That way there's no chance of getting anything confused. So before you can pull the carburetor off, you need to disconnect the solenoid that's on the carburetor. Yours may have a wire tie. I cut mine already, it was here. So just leave that hanging, and you're going to need to take off the fuel line, the breather, and this little, I think it's a fuel return tube. So those are real easy. Just squeeze the clamp and pull it back. And then watch, this one might have some gas in it. So just kind of pull it slow. And point it up to drain the gas out. I know you can't see it, but I pointed it up. Take the breather off. And the other fuel return over here. Kind of twist it best you can. Work it off of there. Twist and pull. And there we go. Just take these 4 bolts loose. Just pull it back slowly. If you don't want to get a rebuild kit, there's a good chance that if you're real careful with this, you can get this loose without destroying the gaskets between here. You will have to take this off if your shroud is still here, because you can't get it off with the shroud in the way. So I'm going to do that. Just pull it back to kind of where the end of the bolts would be. And if you want to go like a sideways motion like this, you can probably break it free and that would be good. Also, the same thing up here where the carburetor sits. Careful, break it free from there before you start backwards with it. That way you don't ruin this gasket either. All right, so we're pretty much free. Just pull the wire out right there, and that's it. So most of the time, these carburetors can be troublesome if you let them sit, or maybe there's a piece of trash in the gas or something like that that made it past the fuel filter. It's pretty easy to take these things apart. You're going to start by removing the screws for the bowl. These are just Phillips head screws. There's probably going to be some gas in the bowl, so you might have a little bit of gas coming out of there. Now, if they sit for a really long time and get gummed up, that can cause a lot more trouble. This one hasn't been sitting that long, so I don't expect to see a lot of varnish inside the bowl. Yeah, there wasn't really any gas coming. Yeah, there was right here. So yeah, what I'm talking about is that varnish will be pretty evident right here. This is a nice aluminum color, and you don't have that. But if you have gas, it's been sitting in there for months on end, it's going to look kind of brown and gooky looking. And if it gets really bad, I've actually used a Brillo steel wool and gone in there and cleaned. Now it's hard to get inside of all these little nooks and crannies. If you run into a really bad problem, you may need to replace the carburetor. But if it's just a mild problem, you can clean that out with some Brillo and steel wool or some kind of a light, I've actually sandblasted these things when they're extremely bad and actually have had some success with that. But if you do that, get the rubber gaskets and all that stuff out of there, and obviously take the solenoid out because you don't want all that sand to wind up in the solenoid. It'll ruin it. But this one looks pretty good, and I suspect there's no problem there. The float looks good, but we're going to take that off anyway. Try to keep the float clean when you put it back, because any kind of trash that you put on there may get back in the carburetor and clog it up all over again. Now if you notice, the needle and seat right here is stuck on there with a little spring. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it is, and it looks good. If you wind up with fuel in the oil tank, probably your needle and seat is leaking, and that is going through to the oil tank. And also if your air filter gets clogged up with gas and it's soaking with gas, it's probably the same problem, because it can either leak in one direction or it can leak in the other direction and cause problems. So this one is not doing that, but this is seat here, and the needle will fix those two situations. So right here we have a couple of jets. If you look at them, the number is both the same, so I don't have to worry too much about mixing these up. And a nice regular screwdriver that'll fit down inside that hole will work. I'm actually using a chisel. It fits perfect. So I'm going to pull these out and set them aside. Now in here you have to be kind of careful. There's two little emulsion tubes that are going to come out, and I don't think you want to get these backwards. So if you notice, when I dump them out right here, notice they were in where they had a single ridge on this side and a double ridge on this side. The single ridge was facing down, so remember that. If you take yours apart to observe how these are positioned in there, same thing with this side. The single ridge is facing down towards the carburetor. Now, I don't know if you can see it on the camera here. Here's a close-up shot of that. There's these little holes that go through here, and these things are always getting clogged up. And more than likely, that's probably where the problem is. So what I usually do is I'll take a little set like this that's made for cleaning out torch heads and torch the little holes in a torch. It's got varying sizes of little rods in there. And I'll take those rods and use them to clean out the emulsion tube. Just like this right here. Go through every one of them holes, one by one, until you get them all. And then after that, take some brake clean, and you can kind of squirt through there, and it'll come through the holes. And then after you do that, take an air compressor and blow through there real good to make sure you get everything out. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other tube, and then I'll be back. All right, once you get these bad boys cleaned up, just put them back. Remember, I had the one ridge was facing towards the carburetor. These are both cleaned up. And I do the same thing with these little jets. Clean them out with some brake clean or carburetor cleaner. I like to use brake clean because it's a little bit cheaper. Same thing to the other one. And I usually will go behind these with some air and blow them out, but I can look through them and see that there's nothing in there. But it's a good idea to blow them out anyway. Make sure you don't cross-thread these jets, or it's going to be a whole lot of sadness. They don't need to be super tight. Now if you notice, there are some little holes like this inside these little venturis. You'll also want to blow these out with some carburetor cleaner. There's another one here. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. I'm trying to angle it. There we go. So there's another one here, another one here. Kind of look for all those little holes and shoot some carburetor cleaner up through there, and then follow behind that with some air. On this side here, I don't really see anything over here, but on this side, there's definitely some little holes there that you're going to want to clean out too. There's like a cluster of 4 right here. Now I'm going to go ahead and go behind that with some air off camera, and I'll be right back. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the float back, making sure it's clean. You don't want any little trash on there. And if your float's been sitting in gas for a long time, it might be kind of orange looking, and you might have a film of some garbage looking stuff on here. If that's the case, then you're going to have to take steel wool or something, a bench grinder with a wire wheel on it, and get all that gook off of there, because what'll probably happen is it may dissolve in the gas once the mower starts running again, and over time those things will flake up and get in your carburetor and clog it up again. And on this bowl, you can't really get it backwards. This one has 2 little indentations here, and they correspond here and here, so you can't get that backwards. And by the way, one way to test this solenoid is to hook it to power, turn the key on and off, and you'll be able to hear that little click in there. Actually, be able to see it moving back and forth if you had it off the mower. So that's one way to test that solenoid to make sure it's working. All right. All ready to go, all cleaned up. By the way, this is not a carburetor rebuild, this is a carburetor cleaning. So if you need a whole rebuild, then you need to get a rebuild kit, and that comes with the O-rings and the gaskets and all that stuff too. But this is just to get you back on the road, and 9 times out of 10, this will work instead of a whole rebuild. All right, so let's put it back together. All right, so I'm gonna put this thing back together in high speed. It's exactly the same thing that I did before, except in reverse.